If you're going to the NCAA tournament next week in Detroit, Michigan, make sure you stop by our happy hour. It's taking place Thursday, March 17th, in between Session 1 and Session 2 at Hockeytown Cafe. It's a sports bar within walking distance to Little Caesars Arena. We're hosting it with Stalemates. We'll have an open tab. We'll have some merch. We'll have a lot of good laughs, good fun. Next Thursday, be there or be square. Now let's get to the episode with Olympic champion David Taylor.
I was just on a different level at that tournament, the whole thing, in preparation. When I got there, I had checked every box in preparation. So there was no doubt in my mind.
We can endure anything and adapt and pivot and change. Wrestling gave us that ability.
I would say nothing in life has impacted me more than the things wrestling has taught me in terms of self-reflection, resilience.
Toughness. Some guys have it, some guys don't.
Adversity, 100%. How to pick myself up and be a man after I failed.
And everything that has shaped my life and where I'm at today would not be there without the values and basically the lessons I've learned through the sport of wrestling.
For me, wrestling saved my life because it allowed me to focus and channel my energy.
We're fortunate if you wrestle, because if you wrestle, natural talent helps, but it's 5% of the ingredient. It pales in comparison to heart and technique and effort.
It humbled me, taught me humility. Nothing can humble you more than wrestling. I think it's the learning to adapt, right? You learn how to adapt, you learn how to solve problems.
If I look back at my time I spent wrestling, if it gave me one thing more than anything else, it's mental toughness.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Wrestling Changed My Life podcast. We have the great David Taylor, the Magic Man, in the building for this interview. We talk about the Big Tens. We talk about David's incredible run to the Olympic gold medal this past summer. We also talk about David's wrestling academy and some of the philosophies he's using with his kids. Love this conversation. Anytime David Taylor comes on the podcast, it's an all-time episode, and this one is no exception. Fan of the week goes to our friend Stephen Foster, who reached out over email to let us know how much he enjoys this show. Stephen, thank you so much for listening, and thank you to everyone who's listening. Your support over the years has allowed this podcast to grow beyond our wildest dreams, and I'm just so grateful that everyone is enjoying the show, and a special thanks to Stephen. This episode is brought to you by Spartan Combat. The Spartan Combat Nationals are coming to Jacksonville, Florida, April 8th through the 10th. It's the only tournament I know of where you can wrestle beach, freestyle, and Greco, and a dual tournament all in one weekend. So if you're looking for a lot of matches, a lot of different looks, a lot of different feels, check out the Spartan Nationals taking place this April 8th through the 10th in Jacksonville, Florida. Register now at SpartanCombat.com. And that's it, folks. Let's give it up for the great David Taylor. David Taylor, welcome back to the podcast, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. We just witnessed an awesome weekend of wrestling. I don't know how tuned into it you are, but what were your thoughts on the Big Tens watching from afar?
Big Ten's is a tough tournament. I mean, I remember just, as a competitor wrestling in it, but now just, watching and observing from afar, it's a hard tournament to win individually. It's a hard tournament to win as a team. And it's grueling. And I think as, kids are getting better and better, the season's getting tougher and the tournament's getting tougher. I mean, it's just the kids. I mean, just for perspective, when I was in school, Quentin Wright was, he was an 8th or 9th seed in the Big Ten and went on to win the national tournament. Won the Big he's a 3-time NCAA finalist. He's had a kind of a rough season that year, and you see that kind of stuff all the time. So it's just, it's fun to watch that level of wrestling. And, I just think sometimes as fans, you just take it for granted. You're like, oh, well, this guy's going to win or, whatever it may be. But it's you got to battle, every single match. And, you got to battle through, some adversity. And a lot of times this point in the season, not everything's going great. So you got to find a way to kind of suck it up. And you got your bids on the line. So it's there's a lot of things that go into it.
And that's coming off the heels of a grueling January and February Big Ten dual schedule.
Definitely. I just the Big Ten is it can be unforgiving, and I think but I feel like you can get through that time period, and then you see the light at the end of the tunnel at the Big Ten tournament. You see the national tournament now, but I really believe though at this point, like the cream rises to the top, the people that really truly are competitors and love to compete, I think you see the best from them, in these 2 weekends. And I think, conferences across the board, but just the depth, when you're talking about you're seeding, guys the whole way down to the brackets, half an NCAA tournament, like some of these weight classes are fielding half the NCAA bracket are basically coming from the Big Tens, so it's a tough conference, and, these guys are really good competitors.
Yeah, I mean, and the match that sticks out to me, to a lot of people, is one of your teammates, Aaron Brooks versus Amin. And, you wrestled Amin at the Olympics, so you know what he can bring to the table. What were your thoughts as you watched that one unfold?
Yeah, I mean, that match had a lot going on. Individually, it had a lot, on the line just for those guys. And then for, winning the Big Ten championship, seeding for the NCAA tournament. That weight class is tough too. You have the UNI kid who's tough. You have Heidley, you have Brooks, you have Amin. I mean, all four of those guys, and there's other tough guys in there, but that's definitely that, from that perspective. So, and the team title was essentially on the line in that match, so I think it was tough. I mean, you got two really good competitors. I mean, their last match was razor thin. This match was razor thin. So I think that's where one thing that's hard about the Big Ten is when you have someone good and you have to wrestle them multiple times throughout the year, it's hard to beat the same person that's good, 3 times. So I think it's just setting it up for, obviously another really good match in the NCAA tournament. It's just now it's just making some adjustments. I'm sure both athletes and coaching staffs will make some adjustments, into the next one. But, Amin did a good job, find a way to win that match.
I mean, you could just imagine what kind of deep waters he was in there, because it looked like Brooks was really setting the pace and wasn't going to let it, slip out of his hands. And then for a second there, it looked like Amin might even ride him out. And then he gets out, and it's kind of like this crazy flurry of action within like the last 30 seconds.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot going on there. Clearly I have my bias, in that match, so I think Aaron is, return national champ, and I think he's really good. So, and I think, obviously there's just a lot going on in that match. You have the wrestling match, but I said you have a lot of stuff going on outside of that too. So
yeah,
for both competitors, I remember just talking to my wife, I'm like, man, this match has got a lot more going on than just this individual match, and in the dual meet, same thing. So it's just, both their matches have been tight, and, Amin's had a lot of experience. He's been around for like 10 years or something. No, but I think he's wrestled so many big matches over his career. So it's, I think that experience obviously plays a little bit of a factor, and, I'm looking forward to these guys wrestling again for sure.
Yeah. I wonder if Trent Headley will get the 1 seed, putting Amin and Brooks at the 2-3. It'd be interesting to see.
It will be interesting to see. And I think people forget about the UNI kick. I don't know exactly. Kaizen. He's tough.
Yeah.
He's really tough. So I don't know. I mean, I don't really know how the seeding works. I think sometimes we lose track of just like what makes sense. Aaron has beaten all those guys. I think he might be UNI's only losses of his career. I think maybe it only beat Aaron. So, I think Aaron deserves to be the number 1 seed, but obviously just head to head and recent matches, obviously play a factor into that, but we'll see what happens. You never know. Like the NCAA, when it comes out, like you feel like you have an idea what's going on, and then the seeds come out and you're like, how the heck does that happen?
Dude, it's so crazy. Yeah. I feel the same way.
You can make an argument.
And when you look at that weight, like you said, Brooks going into that match against Amin, 1 loss ever, and on track to be one of the best college wrestlers of our decade, maybe all time. I mean, just dominant, really never even in close matches except for the Amin match. But man, Trent Hidlay is a beast, and that kid has no fear, and he'll go right after anyone, So there's a couple guys where, it's not often when someone steps on the mat with Aaron Brooks that they actually think they can win. And there's a few guys that probably actually believe that, going into that bracket, which makes it all the more exciting.
Yeah. I mean, those guys are good. They're really good. So there's not a lot, that separates them. And I think we just take that for granted sometimes, because we see success and we just assume that it just happens all the time. But these, there's still so many factors, still kids, there's still a lot of things going on, when you're still a collegiate athlete, you're not a professional at that point, you're still trying to figure things out, your warm up or whatever maybe that goes into it. So, and it's just hard. It's really hard to win a lot in a row. It's not an easy thing. We've seen so much over the last 10 years. It's amazing. We've seen so much success collegiately with these these generational talents, and they're only getting better. They're only getting better. These kids are only getting better. So, it's just when people do that, I think it's something you just gotta wow, okay, this is pretty special, and I think it's, but you got to put on line, and every time you put on line, it's, obviously it's never easier to win, never easier, it's just, it definitely continues to get more difficult. And again, I think with the Big Tens, you have a tough tournament, but you also know you have the NCAA tournament right after that. So, I think the Big Tens are important, but they're not as important as the NCAAs, ultimately. Most kids talk about that, and it's interesting because when they say those things, in their interviews, it's what they're thinking, and I think everyone's programmed hey, the NCAA tournament's kind of all that matters. And that's not necessarily true. I think every competition matters, but it's hard to be on that many times in a row. So it's, and I think we're pretty lucky, we're going to see a lot of really good matches. And, I just think we're going to see a lot of really good ones, obviously in Detroit too.
Yeah. And this year is so crazy because we have all the COVID guys who are still around. So it's a really interesting mix of old guys and young guys. And when you think back to when you were there, your redshirt freshman year, how much you've grown then to now is crazy. And thinking that we're treating these guys, like you said, we talk about Aaron Brooks like he's a pro athlete, but he's a young kid, and so it's, wrestling fans don't really have the pros to talk about. So a lot of times we'll put those same kind of opinions on college kids. But I mean, how much have you changed from your senior year of high school or college or junior year of college to now even?
It's a big change. I mean, but I think going back to what you're saying is the reality though is, I mean, these guys that are in college right now, they are as good as some of the best guys in the world, So I just think, it's been a big shift. I think when I was in school, there was this movement of, okay, well, you don't have to be a junior or senior to be a national champ. You can win early. You can dominate early, and I think we saw that. Now it's a different shift. Now it's these kids, not only it's can I win? Yeah. Can I dominate? Sure. But also it's the next level. These kids are now competing in the senior trials, making teams, winning medals, winning gold medals, so the perspective has shifted. So, it's not really categorized as, all right, this and this. These kids are winning, cadet and junior world championships, making, obviously really competitive at the senior level across the board, right? All of college wrestling. So I think it's just very competitive. And when you talk about changing, I think for some, I think, but I feel where the biggest change is just from a physical maturity level. You look at a guy maybe like the Hamidi kid from Wisconsin, right? He's fearless when he's out there. He's scrapping really hard, but he is not physically mature at all, from a physical standpoint. It's kind of how I was when I was in school. I was scrapping, but I physically wasn't a very mature person until later in my career. But then you have some guys that are very physically mature early on. So I think that's something you have the combination. And now you have these guys that are in longer than their, traditional, collegiate, time period. So you got a lot of mixtures in there, but I think you're asking me about what's changed the most. I would say, these tournaments are all practice, ultimately for, I don't know, whatever your biggest event is, right? Practice for the NCAAs, practice for world championships, Olympic games, so you're learning how to maneuver difficult situations, and then you're learning from those things. But also I would say just that for me specifically was physical maturity. I still wasn't physical mature at all when I graduated college. It didn't really happen to me till I was later, but I matured late. That was just kind of for me. So I would say that was probably the biggest. And then I always had the technique. And obviously when that other side caught up to me, that was what kind of helped me kind of jump to a new level.
Yeah, Dean Hamidi, the babyface killer, man. He is incredible. To see him and Marinelli in the same match, it's like, what are we talking about here? That's polar opposites of physical maturity.
Yeah. No, he's fun to watch. He's fun to watch. Like, you can tell, it's going to be interesting to see, as he continues to, develop, other scoring. But yeah, he goes after it. It's fun to watch, refreshing. It really is, because we went through an era where guys were pretty fearless, scored a lot of points, and I feel like it's slowed down again. And people are like, whether the talent pool is like, there's not a lot of separation, which I think is true. But I think there's a little more these kids are, I think putting a little more emphasis on winning. We're kind of seeing that like dominant mentality, so I think there's a new wave coming up through some younger kids that feel that way, think that way, and he's kind of like that. So it's just for me, I really enjoy seeing people that wrestle that way, because it's, you got to take risks, score a lot of points. You can't be perfect all the time. You can't just think, okay, I'm going to take one shot. Because you only take one shot, you can only score one takedown, So you're going to have to throw yourself in there. Maybe you get reversed, maybe you get taken down, opens the match up. So it's been, it's fun to watch him wrestle. I think that style is what can really I think it's just what can really help the sport move forward, is people wrestle fearless and score a lot of points, so that's cool.
Yeah, I'm thinking about you. I'm thinking about Zane throwing up a lot of points, and like that era was so much fun to watch. Do you think the reason it may have slowed down is it that we have a problem with the mat wrestling rules? And everyone's talking about this, and I just want to get your thoughts on it. Do you think there's less turns, less breakdowns across the board in college wrestling now?
And I don't understand that, because you're so incentivized. 4-point near fall is like, it's a guaranteed major, right? Take down that, you're up 6 points. So I don't really understand, but yeah, there's an element of risk. Like, you want to turn somebody, you gotta try and turn them, and I think we see these conversations all the time about, getting rid of riding time, which I've actually been a proponent of this for a while. I've talked about this before. I think you should only get your point if you turn somebody. I think it should be a turning point. So sure, you can ride them for 5 minutes, but you get your point if you turn them, so yeah, you can ride them forever if you want to. But I think we incentivize turning more. I think that would be important. It should be. 4-point near fall is like, man, that's crazy. I think it was a good change. And I just don't think people really understand like how much of a game changer that is. But, you're just your traditional, like, you're never, it's going to be hard. If you guy has an armbar on you, like, you shouldn't go to your back, but if you're getting, a tilt, you're getting rolled up, in other ways. Like, I think, there's a lot of ways to score points. And I think, kids have to be willing to take a little bit of risk there. I think if you had a turning point, I think it would change kids' mentality a little bit, but it's under the current rule set, so I just think that's kind of how it is. But there's an element of dominance on top for sure. If you can ride someone for a long time, that's definitely a dominating thing, but I'd like to see kids try to turn more, and I think that would be good.
It just seems like, outside of the great Spencer Lee, who really, lays it wide open on top and, puts matches away early, like you were talking about, this, the whole notion of when the guy stands up, dropping down to the single and the 4 count, was that around when you were in college, or is that a new rule?
No, it wasn't. So, we just had like the traditional stalling or whatever, but they added that rule after I was done. And I just think it's hard. The more that you put specific rules in place for specific things, it makes it complicated. We need to simplify it, Again, I think we'd be better with just no stalling calls. Because if you want to stall, you're going to stall, right? It is what it is. If you feel like you have to stall to win, you're going to do it. And you're going to find a way to get creative. If you have 5 seconds, you're going to hold for 4 seconds, you're going to do something else, right? It's just like how it's going to be. And I think there's an element of like strategic wrestling. So I'm not saying everyone that does that is stalling, right? That's not my point here. But I'm just saying, like, you're going to do what you're allowed to do. So if you know you're allowed 5 seconds, what are you going to do for 4? And then you're going to climb up. I just think, and I think getting rid of it, I feel like I think that the push out on in neutral it should be a no brainer, because that stall call on the edge it's not consistent in any way. So a push,
it's confusing. Even for me, it's confusing to watch. I don't know what they're calling.
It's really hard. In freestyle, when we first put the push out rule, people were consumed like it's like a sumo match. And in the beginning it was, but it was also in that weird rules when we had the 3 periods. Now it's like, if you watch a freestyle match, we have the best rule set I think we've ever had. I mean, there's a lot of scoring that happens, a lot of excitement. Kids, it's like, so I feel like at first, maybe the push out rule might be kind of weird, but people will adjust to it. And most of these guys are already wrestling freestyle anyways, so they're accustomed to it. Now you've added an element where like you now have to wrestle 3 feet from the edge, or you're getting pushed down, give up a point. I think that would change open matches up. And the more scoring that happens, the less you're going to see stalling on top or bottom or on your feet, because someone has to score more. We're under right now where there's not a lot of a lot of times those bigger matches, there's not a lot of guys are so like tactical that when the scoring doesn't really happen, well, then it just delays it, So I think we had a turning point on top. It will be really good. Obviously when you're on top, taking someone out of bounds, that's not a push out rule there. I think just get rid of stalling. And, I think you just, and you have the push out rule. And I think you're going to have your times that you're going to have matches that, one person's going to be running around or whatever that may be. But, I just think it just seems easier to understand, because, stalling, like you could do everything to earn a call and never get it. You could do very little and get one. So it already has a lot of impact on matches, or lack of impact. So I don't know that it really changes a ton if you got rid of it, but it's those are tricky things. I think those are kind of tricky situations.
And any of the, mainstream sports, if we're talking about how do we make wrestling more appealing, mainstream sports are super easy to follow and understand. And, basketball, anyone can follow it. Football, anyone can follow it. Wrestling is very tough to follow. So you've mentioned a couple rule changes that would simplify it, and I like both of those. Let me ask you about this one that I've talked about before with Adam Terapelli. A lot of people think it's going too far, but how do you feel about moving folk style to like top and bottom 30 seconds max? If you can't turn in 30 seconds, you go back to your feet. If you can't get out in 30 seconds, you don't get the escape point, and they just stand it back up. Is that too big of a shift for folk stylers?
I can definitely see that argument, but then you're making the decision then that you're making folk style like a development league for freestyle, right? You're kind of adopting a similar thing. And I think folk style wrestling is awesome. Obviously, we have so many kids experience to it at a young age. I think that mat wrestling is so important. Like for people that say, you should be able to let them up, whatever, I don't know about that. I think mat wrestling, to be able to get off the bottom, to be able to reverse somebody, those are important skills to have, to be able to ride somebody and turn somebody and create a scramble on top. Those are important skills to have. And by doing that, you're like taking so many scoring opportunities. You're saying, we don't need to teach them anymore. We don't need to learn them. We don't need to understand those positions. We just need to, it's like straightforward. Get a takedown, get on top, go back on your feet, get a takedown, go on top. Even freestyle is not like that. I mean, freestyle, there's a lot of scoring that happens, in a lot of other unique situations. So, but I think at a young age, I think we're going to miss out on a lot of development. And I think folk style, we have a huge advantage internationally because of our folk style background, because we can wrestle in so many unique situations that you don't get to if it's just take down, get on top, let's say for 30 seconds, get back on your feet. We're going to miss a lot of development. So, I think it's just, although a lot of people aren't doing those things, but a lot of them know how to do it. So maybe it's a way that we can, I don't know. I don't know if there's a way that you can encourage more, wrestling specific situational things. I would rather you say, okay, after 30 seconds, if nobody scored, we're going to like a scramble situation, where both guys are going to start with a high crotch or something to that effect. Now I'm just off the top of my head. Now you're creating scrambles, right? And I think that's more what you want to see. And that, again, to make specific rules for specific situations, I think is tough because it never works out the way that you think it's going to work out. But I would really be advised against eliminating mat wrestling because I think it's really important for development for kids.
And when you were coming up, you came up in the Ohio Jeff Jordan system, but after you moved, and now you're teaching kids in Pennsylvania, you have your own academy. When you were coming up with Coach Jordan, was turning a big focus, or was that mainly a neutral camp and you learned turning somewhere else?
Yeah, there was very little emphasis put on mat wrestling. I think if you look at the people that have come out of that program, not a lot of mat wrestling, it was very fundamental. Like, essentially the system was built on be in good shape, cut weight, be good in your high crotches, your single legs, your front headlocks, really good in those good positions. But mat wrestling I still think it's been a crutch for a lot of people who have come out of the program. For as many great wrestlers that have had success in high school, you have to be good on the mat to dominate in college, and I was something that I was always pretty good on the mat as a kid. I was definitely my feet was actually probably my worst situation. In high school, when I wrestled my big matches, it was like I just have to get on top. I have to get on the mat. I can reverse somebody, I can get on top, I can ride them and turn them. But where I struggled the most were guys that were good on their feet, which is ironic because we spent so much time on our feet in that program. I mean, I was good, right? Mm-hmm. But I'm talking about highest level matches that I was wrestling in. My mentality is like, I just got to get on the mat. And in college, I got a lot better on my feet, but it was still, I want to win these matches, the best matches. I want to get on the mat. And things have changed a little bit now. Obviously I think I'm very proficient in a lot of areas on my feet, but it's, I think mat wrestling again is really important. And in Pennsylvania, for example, so Ohio versus Pennsylvania, Ohio, there's very little emphasis put on the mat in general, right? Just the way that the rule set is. If it's a close match, the guy on top will get hit for stalling every time. So kids are like it's just not that important, right? You're not really incentivized to ride somebody and stuff, and I think that's kind of like an underlying Ohio, however that rule sets are kind of looked at. Or in Pennsylvania, like when we're teaching our kids in Pennsylvania, I mean, it's a different beast. I mean, when you're talking about these young kids and they're in a 2-1-1 period, I mean, mat wrestling is pretty much, you can get off the bottom and you can ride somebody. I mean, you're going to be really hard to beat, So I think Pennsylvania has traditionally produced a lot more mat wrestlers because that's the way that it's developed all the way through from the youngest time you go to PJWs to the high school state tournament. Mat wrestling is a huge piece of that success. Whereas in Ohio, it's almost like, hey, if you're on top, we're going to hit your stalling. So then they kind of cut them and then it's mostly on your feet. But again, I think, college wrestling, we talked about how important mat wrestling is. So if you're not working on that, it's going to be tough. And there's individuals obviously that are good in different areas, but traditionally that was my experience growing up in Ohio. And then now spending a lot of time in the development in Pennsylvania, that's a huge difference.
Yeah. I've heard you say that before, way back on, I think it was T-Row and Funky, when your dad would take you to is the Nittany Line Open a big kids tournament, or I'm trying to think of what it was called, but you said like you would go to it and just couldn't believe how different the officiating was with the mat wrestling. And I got to think that, I'm in Chicago, Illinois is a huge takedown cut state. And it's a problem because you look at the guys who come out and how long it takes them to adapt to that.
It's hard. I was good on the mat, so I'm always going to be a proponent for mat wrestling. And I think it's a huge difference maker. So, when I would go into a match, it was like, okay, well, I might have to work really hard for this first takedown. But once I get it, and that was how people wrestled me. Like they would fight me really hard. But once I got that first takedown in college, then I got a turn. Then it was like, okay, now they kind of relax and I can take them, cut them down, take them down their back. And now you can start opening them up. And it might take 3, 4, 5 minutes to do that. But I always wrestled that way from a young kid all the way through. But I just think that mat wrestling, if you truly want to dominate somebody, you need to get on the mat because you're wrestling the best guys in the country. It's going to be hard to take them down consistently multiple times, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, but one turn, that's worth 3 takedowns, by the time so I just think it doesn't take much effort. It takes like 3 seconds three swipes, you know, and you're getting 2 points. 4 swipes, you're getting 4 points. So I think I think the problem is not collegiate wrestling, it's the development up to collegiate wrestling. I think it's the youth level, it's the elementary level, it's, you know, junior high and high school, developing more developing more mat wrestling savvy on the mat, I think will help that, you know, where we say problem in college right now. And I think I just think your officiating affects that. Because if you're a coach and you're like, man, if my guy's on top, I know he's gonna hit for stalling, we're not gonna spend a lot of time here. You know, if I can go bottom and know that the guy's gonna cut me, I don't really have to spend a lot of time getting off the mat. In Pennsylvania, you go bottom, you better have a plan to get off the mat or you're gonna get ridden, you know, and same, you know, so I think I think that's an important thing. And, you know, I'll always be a proponent for mat wrestling. I think it's really important.
And you just got back, I'm guessing you got back from the PJWs, which is the Pennsylvania Junior State Tournament, middle school state tournament. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Bo Bassett, so I always follow what he's doing, and I saw he was out there. What's your take on just youth wrestling in America now that we've wrapped up yet another folk-style youth season?
Well, it's not, it's definitely not wrapped up. Pennsylvania, there's actually 4 consecutive state tournaments. So you have your junior high state tournament last weekend. Well, you're getting ready to start our high school state tournament tomorrow. Then we have 2 separate. We have the PJWs, like your traditional youth state tournament, and then we have a Keystone. So what happened was, PJWs was it forever, but during the COVID time, PJW shut down. So another organization started one, Keystone, and they did a good job, you know, and then now they're both running simultaneously. So kids have either chose one or the other, or they're doing both. So it's a busy month this month. So, you know, all 4 weekends we have state tournaments, you know, and it's tough, you know, so we're training kids, you know, for each group, you know, for a week, you know, but like what they're doing that week is not necessarily for everybody. So it's been, but it's been good, you know, it's hard to win a state championship in Pennsylvania at any age group, because, you know, just you have this talent pool of wrestlers that is very deep. You have, you know, a mixture of, you know, many factors. And this just, they're good, very skilled, you know? So, last weekend, actually, so we had PJWs going on in Johnstown, which is like an hour and 15 minutes. Then we also had the high school regionals last weekend. So we had 2 of our coaches were at PJWs. I went to one of the regional tournaments, watched the Big Tens in the morning, went to one of the regional tournaments. Then the coaches came and we finished up the regional together. We came back, watched the last of the Big Tens. The next day, Mark and I went back to the PJWs for the finals, you know, and then came back and then started this week, you know, obviously, and still integrating my training along with that. So that's going to be us for the next like 4 weekends, basically. So it's pretty fun to have those things spread out. But so I would say, like, when talking about these rules, like, you know, I'm involved at every level, you know, I'm as a senior level athlete, you know, wrestling, what I'm doing, you know, being around the collegiate program, and then they're having a direct relationship with high school, junior high, elementary, and the development all the way through, you know, and I think you got to see and evaluate those things and then continue to make adjustments, you know, like it's not just like a one size fits all. Hey, this is what's good for every single person. But I mean, I really think like mat wrestling development, go back to our big thing here is mat wrestling development at a young age is going to make it better. And I want to have less of these like conversations about changing rules if there's more emphasis on mat wrestling at a young age. And it's going to help your kid be way more successful if they're good on the mat too, you know, during that period of time. So I think that's a kind of an important aspect to think about.
And for folks who don't know, you run, it's called M2 Training Center, Magic Man Training Center. You have an awesome standalone facility. Could you just talk a little bit about that program and how it's grown over the years?
Yeah, it's very exciting. So I started this in 2000, was the fall of September of 2017, I think. And we moved to our own facility in summer 2018, right before I wrestled in the World Championships. And it's a very rewarding thing. You know, you get to like spend time with these kids, and we have a really good coaching staff. So my situation is unique because I'm still a competitor. Most people that start clubs are usually dads. You know, they have, I want my son to have a really good situation. I'm going to start this, you know, and then when their son kind of gets to the end of it, it kind of fizzles out, you know, or it's just like again, you just start it and you get it going. And then once you get it going, you developed, I think those were the, the really successful clubs that happened. Being still as a competitor, balancing competing with, developing and coaching kids was something that I was really passionate about. And I was always like, do I want to wait and do this when I'm done competing? But that could be 10 years. So I just want to start now. And I knew that was really important to have a really good coaching staff and to build up our coaches along, during that period of time, because a lot of times is when, if I wasn't there, people want to be there, and that's just like, that would have hurt the development in the beginning. So in the beginning, we were all there together all the time. And it was double duty. I was just married. I didn't have kids at the time. So it was easy to finish practice and go right to the next practice. Easier. We were all there, and just like helped, at the time was Mark McKnight, Eric Thompson, and myself. And, we had like a very small youth program, but most of our kids were like junior high and high school. So the kids that are graduating right now start with us in 7th grade. So that's like our very first kind of group of kids. Now these kids in high school, the kids that are freshmen right now, we started with them when they were like 3rd or 4th grade, So it's like this kind of, we're getting to that first generation of kids that we've spent a good amount of time with. And it's just a balance, like try and be involved in every aspect that I possibly can. Even when I'm not there, I'm following the events. I'm trying to communicate with the parents. And we developed.
Sorry. So are you going to youth tournaments all winter as well? Like all day affairs, or is that something you've been able to offload a little bit? Because that's taxing.
Yeah, it is. So there's so many youth tournaments, so you can't really choose all of them. But, like I personally try and make a handful of them a year, the ones that I can make. It's hard, from a club standpoint to go to all the things, because you have, as a club, we're supplementing, other programs, right? Other youth programs, junior high, high school. So a lot of times it's just being there and support, like last weekend, for example, like we went to the regional tournament that they're with their high school coaches, but we just want to be there to support them. We spend 12 months a year with these kids, but during the high school season, their high school coaches are their coaches, and we're just trying to help supplement that and help just be supportive, and just be there. So we're just kind of in the background, and it's cool to see these kids continue to develop. But so now Eric's went on, he's a coach at Arizona State. So now it's myself, Mark McKnight, and Brad Pataki. So all 3 of us wrestled at Penn State, and we have a very good balance, in terms of we have a same of what we want to teach, but we can deliver it in different ways, and I think it's really good for the kids because it's refreshing. It's not like there's like hearing me say something to them all the time, or Mark, or, or Brad. So the rotation is, I think, really solid, and I think the kids respond very well to that. And it's exciting right now because, like I said, this is the era that we've spent, 12 months a year for 5 years with, and they're getting ready to go to school, some of the high school, the seniors, but then that next wave coming up through the kids that we started with, like they were probably 8, the very first day they ever started practice. They'll be our first like start to finish kids. Those kids are now in 7th grade. So it's just like, it's been pretty fun we're kind of really starting, I think, break through and change. And it's good month this week of state tournaments, and then we switch right into freestyle, so it's I try and take, my approach that I've had as a competitor, and use those experiences at different levels and use that as it's not what I did is definitely not what I think everybody should do. So you're teaching like to the masses, but I think it's been trial and error. What I thought when I very first started is definitely way different than what I think now. And I just think trying to continue to learn and relate to the kids as much as I can. And, but it's a well-rounded approach, but just a lot of help with our other coaches and very supportive parents, cause it's unique. Like I would love to be there all the time, but I think I'm there 2 to 3 days a week. And then when I can be there more, I can be there more. There's sometimes I'm there less based on when I'm training, competing. But we've been doing this for 5 years, making a lot of progress, and it's working. And I foresee we're at that point now where I really think we're going to make that big jump, where kids are going to start going to college, or getting those kids into high school. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun over the next 10 years to really start seeing these kids break through and then start to wrestle in college. I think we have a couple kids right now that are doing that, and just going to start coming.
Kids are so rewarding, like you said, because like they wear their heart in their sleeve. They're all in it, and you really get to see them develop on and off the mat, throughout, some of the craziest years of your life, middle school and high school. I'm just curious if you can remember, was there anything you thought going into it in 2017, 2018 that you've thrown out the window and you realize that that approach is no good, or this technique is, and if you can't think of anything, it's fine. I'm just curious what changed, now that you've been in it for a while.
Well, I mean, I was out of it for a long time, like I did my thing, as a kid coming up through. I graduated college. I was on the international scene. So I was pretty far removed, honestly, from just the temperature. And it was so much more competitive than what I thought it was going to be. That was the biggest thing. Like, I remember being like, wow, these kids are pretty good. All right, we'll go to these tournaments. Be like, wow, okay, there are some really good kids here, because I just been away from it for a long time. And it's amazing. Like, when I was a kid, the club scene wasn't really there. It was kind of starting to develop as I was going through, but it wasn't prominent. Now there's so many clubs all over the place, kids that are specializing full-time, year-round, private training, small group, high-level events. The priority is on, like, the best kids now are prioritizing making world teams, being world champions, and that's a big shift. Like, I was at the forefront of that, but that priority wasn't there. It was on like the national tournaments. It was on Fargo. It was on Super 32 was just starting, now it's like, that's like a figurehead event that you have to prepare for specifically. So it took a couple years, I think, to understand, like, okay, where are these big events? How do we cater our training, to those things, and just trial and error. We spent a lot of time, years, like, where you want to show so many things, but it's like, well, we need to really focus on these things to get to these things. And it took us a lot of time. Now it's just like, we're at a spot now where we can now really start implementing specific things because we have such a good foundation built. And it took a long time to build that foundation. So, but it's just one of those things where it's like, it's consistency from the kids, consistency from the coaching staff, but really the parents. Like, we have great parents, really good supportive parents, that are really good friends of mine, and it happens to be that we're also coaches of their kids. So we have a really unique situation. It's not like the typical club situation that people probably think, like it's a very family oriented place, very culture driven. Our kids are like really good friends with each other, and they're wrestling each other. I mean, this weekend we have the same weight class where we have the 1 and 2 kid in the state in the same division. And then in both divisions, we have the number 1 kid in the state in both divisions that are trained with each other all the time.
Wow.
And they wrestle each other all the time, and they're buddies, and obviously it's hard, and you're going out and competing, and it's difficult. You just got to sit back and watch, but we were not there 3 or 4 years ago, so it's definitely, it's been cool, but you can't do those things without great kids and great parents. And we're fortunate to have both of those things. And then I can't say enough about Mark McKnight. He's just a very special human. Like, he cares so much about the kids. He's there for them all the time. He can relate to them. He can be hard on them. And he's like a huge pillar in obviously where we're at right now. So, this would never have been possible without Mark, so we make a really good team, and it's been fun. So obviously by no means is like, hey, but this just, it's been a lot of the development years, and now now we can really start moving forward, and it's going to be really, really fun, I think, over the next 10, 15, 20 years, as we've had this group of kids that we spend a lot of time with.
I think it's so smart that you did it while you're competing, because your brand is higher than ever. I mean, and like the kids who are in your club now, they can actually watch you wrestle. Whereas I think back to one of the great academies of Illinois, Overtime, Sean Bourmet was the man, but we never knew that he wrestled Pat Smith in the finals. We had no idea that this elite wrestler too. And maybe some of them did, but I don't think a lot of kids did. So you're doing that now. And then when you do retire, you have this foundation already built versus spending 5 years to build it up. Do you enjoy the business aspect of it, like payroll and finance, or do you offload all that stuff?
In the beginning, I offloaded it, but now I do all that stuff. So I just always told the coaches that I was with, I'm like, hey, listen, my goal is that you guys coach and you don't have to handle any of those things, you know? And originally I was kind of part of that. I just want to show up and coach type deal. But, you know, I think it's, you know, that's part of the process. Like if you run a club as a hobby, it will fizzle out, you know, and it has to be ran as a business because it is, right? I mean, you're in the business of developing kids. And if you don't treat it as a, you know, I try and be professional in every aspect because the kids and the parents deserve that. You know, it's not like, you know, hey, this is how it's, you know, whatever it may be. It's just, it's structured and it's better for everybody. So, but that stuff is not, it's not enjoyable to do those things, but it's necessary. And again, it's just learning in all those departments. And it's cool because like I can go in and talk to the kids and I've always, and when you relate to them, it's not like, I think this will work, or I think you should think this way. I can speak certainly because I've done it and I'm still doing it, you know? And I think they get a lot of confidence from that because they know, like when I tell them, hey, this is what we need to focus on because of this and this and this. And then they go, what we're doing, they can go see me do it in the Olympic gold medal final, you know? And then they can have a lot of confidence, but like, yeah, okay, that makes sense. That's definitely something that I see why we've been working on that for the last couple of months. And they also have a pretty high understanding of wrestling because of just like trying to explain those things to them. So it's not just like showing moves. So it's a special environment. So if you haven't been there before, I mean, I definitely suggest, you know, we have camps throughout the year and we have people that make pretty crazy, significant sacrifices to get their kids there. And it's cool to see that, you know, it pays off for them. You know, it's very rewarding to see, I think, for the parents and the kids to see like the success, you know, that they're having because it takes a big commitment.
Yeah, huge commitment. And, you know, you mentioned the Olympics and we're definitely going to wrap on that for about 10 minutes before we let you go. But just before we sign off on this part, so I didn't know you had camps for non-members throughout the summer, and we have, you know, tons of parents listening to this where they never wrestle. They just want the best for their kid. And so they're trying out all these camps. So how would someone find out about your camps and get involved? And when are they?
So, yeah, so we go, like our website's m2trainingcenter.com. And, you know, our camps they're a little challenging. Basically it's around my schedule. So it's like, okay, well, this is when I'm wrestling the ranking series tournament. We're going to do the camp before that. And I typically do camps right after I compete. So I'll go compete and I come right home from competition. So right after the Olympic Games and right after the World Championships, we had a camp the next weekend because I know
what?
Like, David, what are you doing? I'm like, I want to, you know, I want to be here. You know, I haven't seen these guys in a couple of weeks, you know, and like, so, and it's funny because, you know, we have a very consistent group of kids that come to camps, you know, and our kids, but I'll say something to them. And I remember before the gold medal, I said, listen, when I come back here, I'm going to show you guys my Olympic gold medal, you know? And I came back in the next camp, you know, you had 20 or 30 of those kids that were there. And I said, listen, I told you when I came back, I was going to show you my Olympic gold medal, you know, and they were able to see it, get pictures of it with it and stuff. So it's good. But our next camp, we're having a freestyle camp, April 8th to 10th. And then we'll have a camp in June, trying to still finalize that date once I figure out what Final X is. We usually have one in July. July will be tough this year just based on the World Championships being in September, being a little bit earlier. And then we have a top camp in the fall, and then we have a Super 32 preparation camp in the fall as well. So usually have like 4 to 5 camps a year. But the best thing is just like, I usually try and put them on my Instagram. I put them on our M2 Training Center Instagram. And then just, if you email in info@m2trainingcenter.com, you get on our email list, and then you can send out the emails on the information. The camps do fill up pretty quick. And, well, yeah, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. It was a lot of people when I wanted to start the club, they really second guessed it. They're like, I don't know if you can balance that and competing. I hadn't won anything yet. I wasn't world champ when I started it, you know, I hadn't made a team yet, you know, and they're like, you haven't done it. I don't think you can balance these two things, you know, and it was the best thing that I ever did because it gave me the balance I think I needed. It's a great outlet. I can go in there and, you know, and sharing the information with the kids is like something I really love. And then to be able to see them develop. And it's funny because like it'll be on the, most of the kids, most of my teammates on the world team, the Olympic team, they know my kids because I'm always talking about them all the time. So then they'll follow them. They're like, oh yeah, he's doing really good, and so it's just like, it's fun. So I would definitely, it's a unique situation, very grateful for it.
Yeah, especially when, usually when an academy or a club like your own has a camp, it's maybe exclusive just to those members, and sometimes they'll let a few outsiders in. So knowing that someone from Illinois or upstate Minnesota, I'm thinking of a family that always reaches out, they can come in and be a part of that and be around some of your kids and learn from an Olympic champion. So awesome. And we'll post the links to all that in the show notes. But before we let you go, sir, Olympic Games. I mean, my goodness, what a match against Yazdani. That second, the singlets ripped. Oh my, it's just amazing. Tell us everything about it. I mean, was it, was it what you thought? What was your impressions on the games itself?
It's a loaded question, because it's something that I specifically had dreamt about, for 22 years. And when I was a kid, there weren't many kids running around saying like, hey, I want to be an Olympic champion. They're like, I want to get the go-kart because I won Tulsa Nationals or something like that, And I was just like, I always like wanted to win those things, but that was always the ultimate goal. And so to make the team this year, I felt like that was like, once I made the team, it was kind of a relief because now it's time. There's a lot of stuff that gets built up, because with the delayment, I was injured before, delay. So tore my ACL. I was back, then was delayed. So then I trained basically for 2 straight years with like no break, basically, which everybody did, but, make the team. And then now it was like, I was able to breathe. And then, I had a really good training cycle leading up to the Olympics. And, it was one of those things where it was just, all right, I was going to wrestle Yazdani in the finals. I just knew that. I knew that was one of the, I was actually drawn in the bracket. So I could have wrestled him early in the bracket, but, it was just, that's been the match internationally, for me. And, he's had 2.5 years to prepare for that match pretty much, so I knew he'd make some changes, but I was just on a different level at that tournament. The whole thing, in preparation, when I got there, I had checked every box in preparation. So there was no doubt in my mind, that what was going to happen. The outcome was a done deal prior to getting there. So I loved every aspect of the warm up, the walking out in the tunnel. Like we had a contingent of like 50, Americans, all 3 styles, medical staff, personnel. So when you run out there, like they're there watching us, and you get a little like shot of adrenaline. And then I went on the mat and it was just the best. It was like the highest event of my life. And it was the best wrestling I'd ever done, so it was, and it took every ounce of that in finals, every ounce of that, Yazdani is, he's going to go down as one of the greatest of all time in our sport. It's like that era of like him and Sajjalai and Snyder. They've already won like 7-8 medals, Yazdani's 4-time gold medalist now, I think. So the margin of error is small, and I thought I wrestled a really good match, but it came down to the end. I had 1 minute and 10 seconds to get a takedown, and I think I counted. I shot 17 times in that match, and I got 2 takedowns, and all the training and the sacrifices that, my wife has made or my coaches have made, my family, or, that I've made in training and preparation, I needed every ounce of that. So I think at the end, when you win in that fashion, getting a takedown, short time left on the biggest stage of your life, any doubt that you ever had, it's gone because you knew you needed all of it. And it was an element of just relief and excitement because I felt like that was my mission. I think that was the expectation of probably any wrestling fan or coach I've ever been around, of like, hey, this is the end goal for David. to be able to achieve that was really special. And Casey Cunningham and Cael Sanderson and Cody Sanderson and Jake Varner, these guys that I've spent, third of my life with, and they've spent a lot of time with me. So, to be able to share that moment, with them, and just being a part of a program where I knew when I went to Penn State that when I went to Penn State, I knew that this was a program that could help me get better in college and fulfill all of my goals, and to come here, have the career I did in college, face a little bit of adversity, and then win a world championship and win an Olympic gold medal under the same coaching staff. I just feel like that's really special, so it was, you just really not a lot else to say. I fulfilled what I wanted to do, and really grateful I was able to fulfill that, with the people that have put a lot of time into me.
It was amazing to watch, and I get chills thinking back to it, and just knowing how that match with you and Yazdani went at the Worlds in that first round, and how wild that was. And then this one, it didn't look like his conditioning. It looked like his conditioning was there, and so it was going to be a dogfight to the end, and it was. But man, just thinking about you and at Penn State, just wrecking everyone, and then you and Dake both going through that period. I don't know how many years it was, where no one had made a world team because of JB and the weight classes. And then you finally get there. It's like, man, it was just so long coming, and unbelievable to see you get there and get it done. What did you do that night and the next morning?
So, basically when that, you finish and you're just you're in this like state of Zen. You're just like, you just like no care. You're just like, okay, yep, all right, what sounds good. Where do you need me? Okay, yeah, I'll be there. Sure, yep, sounds good. You're just like looking at your gold medal, like, wow, I did this. It's amazing. Like all that life's work for this medal, and what that means. And not you're doing for the medal. It's just like to say, like, yeah, I'm the best in the world in the biggest event that you possibly can have in amateur sport. Like it's that's in our sport, that's the pinnacle. So it's just. Everyone understands what Olympic champion means. Like you say world champion, they're like, oh, cool. What is that? What's the world championships? Oh yeah. Is that like the Olympics? But when you say Olympics, the whole world stops for the Olympics. Everybody understands what it is, so it's just like, it's a title. It's an accolade. It's a piece that once you've achieved it, it stays with you forever. So that night, you do like your little media circuit, or whatever that you do. And then I came home and I had a Coca-Cola with Casey. It was the first Coca-Cola I've had in like, I don't even know, forever. I couldn't even finish it. It was so bad. I was like halfway through, I'm like, I can't finish this. It's so bad, But then I went and I got back to my room. It was like 3 a.m. I think roughly, because we didn't wrestle till it was pretty late. By the time you wrestle, get through like your drug testing, get through the media stuff or whatever it may be, I got back to my room and I started FaceTiming my family and Coach Cal in California. Cause now it's like, they've been up all night watching, and just talking with them. And I slept for a few hours and then I got up the next day, went to the facility and watched the next group of guys wrestle. And, but again, you just like sleep doesn't matter. You're just like, I won the Olympics yesterday. So I've been functioning on this, like, this regimented schedule for so long, just like thrown out the window. You're just eating whatever you want to eat, and stuff like that. But it's just it's a pretty pretty special time.
Pretty amazing, man. It was, like I said, awesome to watch. And I don't mean to put you on the spot, but assuming health is where it's at, shooting for 2024.
I am. So when I finished the Olympics, it was the World Championships were right around the corner. And when you're talking about it, like, yeah, Olympics, World Championships, but there's so much priority in the Olympics. The World Championships was like,
how do you get up for that, man? A couple of weeks after the Olympics.
It was really hard. I didn't have the same desire to train that I did. I didn't have this, it was like I talked about this before. My life was on pause for so long you get done, life's off pause. You're getting back to the people that you haven't got back to. You're like, my wife and I have, multiple different businesses that we're doing. My wife gave birth like a week before we left. So, you're in the hospital, you're going to training, you come back to the hospital, and, you just won the biggest event of your life. So it's hard to kind of find that same motivation. And, I'm at a good world championship, and I still I think that person that was there was a fraction of where I was at, 7 weeks before that. And I was, I don't know, winning takedown, and just didn't finish takedown, against the same guy who's really good, so we're talking about little pieces. So I think after that, it was kind of like, all right, I need a break. I took like about 4 months off from training, the longest I've ever really taken. And I was, kind of struggling with like, well, do I want to do this again? Do I want to do this type of commitment again, knowing what it takes? But ultimately, when I really kind of thought about it, definitely hard. It was a 22-year sprint marathon to get to the first one. Now it's only 2 years away. So that's a big difference. You've been there, you know what it feels like. And it took some hard conversations. And I think just ultimately you got to wrap your mind around, no one cares about what you've done. You step out there, like now, it's like, it doesn't mean anything. You got to decide that you're all in again or you're all out, and I decided, and after that period of time, talked to my wife, talked to my coaches, that, yeah, I'm back, I'm all in, so it's been actually, it feels really good to get back into training and get back into that kind of that routine that you develop when doing that. And I believe I'm the best in the world and nothing has changed, so, and I'm looking forward now, definitely wrestling Yazdani again. He's made some adjustments, in our matches. And, now I'm looking forward to implementing my adjustments, and
let's go, baby.
Yeah. It's exciting. It's definitely very exciting. And I'm glad I took the time and then just rush back into it. Cause I think I would have probably had a tough spot, kind of, you rush back into it, you're training and you're like, wow, okay, this is like a 2-year grind. I took that time off, got really refreshed. And the difference is like, now it's like, I want to do it. I'm doing it because I want to do it, not because I feel like anything else. I have nothing else to prove. I have nothing else I have to do in my sport of wrestling. But now I want to. I want to win 2 more world championships. I want to win another Olympic gold medal. And that's it takes that type of commitment, going into it. And it's going to be a battle. It's definitely not going to be easy. And I'm really, truly looking forward to it, to getting back into it. So it's 2024 in Paris. I will be there. It's going to be tough, obviously, you got a lot of hurdles between now and then, but I believe I'm the best in the world, and I don't think that's changed.
And you got the whole support system out there. I mean, Jimmy Kennedy's on staff. It's your brother-in-law, so you got the whole crew. You got the businesses going. So it seems like things are going great. And obviously, you got a young stable at Penn State. I'm sure you're getting your hands on Brooks and Staraki and Max Dean all the time. So man, what an optimal environment. The last thing I was going to sign off with, then we'll let you go, is, Snyder's been training with you guys, and there's, since then Gilman has come in, but Snyder's more your weight. We'll just sign off with this. What's he brought to the squad, and what have you learned from him?
I mean, I learned from all those guys. And I think the way that I relate to it is like, there's never a thought in like where you're at, because of every day in practice, you know where you're at, because I mean, we have the best training environment in the world, especially for that group of weight classes. I mean, I think every name you meant that you said, I think every one of those people have the ability, either have already achieved being the best in the world or have the ability to be the best in the world. So we have a really unique situation here. And with Kyle, I feel like he just brings this youthful energy every day. He loves to compete. Like, he loves to compete in everything he does. And when you go with him, you have to be ready for the toughest day that you've ever wrestled. Every time you wrestle. And I think that's tough. It's tough to replicate that. The success that he's had but it hasn't changed. Like, he's still hungry. He wants to compete. He wants to travel anywhere he can to wrestle the best people. He constantly wants to get better. He's constantly challenging himself. So that for me is awesome, to have somebody that has, the size and, he's, obviously the size, he's bigger than me, but also has that tenacity in the way he wrestles. So, he brings it. Like, a lot of times I'm bringing it and the other person is just trying to basically sustain it and find a way. Well, now he's bringing it to me and I have to find a way to sustain that pace with him, so I feel like that is where he is, specifically from a wrestling standpoint, is great. And then you add in that youthful energy and just pure passion to want to be the best. Like, you're like, oh, well, all right, I see what Kyle's doing. I see where his intensity level is, and I have to match that. And he's just like that with everybody. Like, and he's an amazing human, and really grateful to have him here as a friend and as a teammate. Because obviously I think we're all in a better situation with a guy like that.
I mean, when a guy like that's climbing for the great Sadulayev, I mean, he's bringing it every day because he's still got a chip on his shoulder. And so you're around him. It's like, I can't imagine the chemistry and the energy when you guys are really tuning it up come May, come June, when things are getting closer.
He's ready. He's wrestling Jaden next week, so it's like this week, getting back and training with him, because I'm kind of like just getting back. Like, I'm not quite obviously at that level right now, but he's man, I wrestled him and I'm like, wow, all right, here we go. I see the intensity level I need to bring tomorrow, and but he feels good right now. He's excited, obviously it's a pretty high level match, a 2 out of 3, with another guy who's like, best in the world, different, 2 complete polar opposite styles. But he's hungry and excited, and it's going to be fun to watch that. So, but no, I'm really, really grateful for Kyle. He's an amazing guy.
Bro, he hasn't taken any time off, it seems like, since the Worlds. It's like he's been in Russia. He's been just going. So he's an animal, man.
He loves it. Like, and it's cool because, and Jason Knopf, it's been really good for Jason Knopf because he's kind of adopted that. He's jumped on that same thing. I feel like he's so good, but you need that international experience. And he's gained a lot of that this year, and just spending time with Kyle and traveling with him and competing. So that's what Kyle's just like, a guy who uplifts everybody around him. It's like, hey, that's what I'm doing. You guys want to come with me? Let's do it. Let's go wrestle. Let's travel. And that type of, we have a lot of success and people have and it's contagious, and being around Kyle is contagious.
I bet, man. Well, hearing this, people are going to be excited and fired up. Thank you so much for your time, David Taylor. It's always a pleasure. We wish you nothing but the best, and you have a great day, my friend.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
If you're going to the NCAA tournament next week in Detroit, Michigan, make sure you stop by our happy hour. It's taking place Thursday, March 17th, in between Session 1 and Session 2 at Hockeytown Cafe. It's a sports bar within walking distance to Little Caesars Arena. We're hosting it with Stalemates. We'll have an open tab. We'll have some merch. We'll have a lot of good laughs, good fun. Next Thursday, be there or be square.